Stop scrolling before you miss the conversation everyone is whispering about. What happens when one star looks another in the eyes and says the one thing nobody else dares to say? What if success is easy to find but love is the real maze? Stay until the end because this story is not about jealousy or control. It is about a moment of honesty that changed everything. Joseph sat quietly in the corner while cameras flashed and conversations floated through the room like soft waves. The event had all the ingredients of another glamorous night. Bright lights, perfect smiles, endless greetings. Yet somewhere beneath all the excitement, there was an unexpected conversation waiting to happen. Bai Lu moved gracefully from one group to another, exchanging warm words and laughter. She had the energy people noticed instantly. Confident, charismatic, effortlessly social. But Joseph watched with a different expression. Not judgment, not annoyance, just curiosity. As the evening stretched on and the noise around them softened, an opportunity finally appeared. He walked over casually. For a moment they exchanged normal conversation. Work, projects, busy schedules. The usual things people say when they have spoken many times before. Then Joseph suddenly asked a question. Do you ever stop and think about what you actually want? Bai Lu looked surprised. What do you mean? Joseph smiled lightly. You are always moving, always meeting people, always surrounded by attention. But do you ever stop long enough to know who deserves access to you? The question landed differently than expected. At first she laughed. That sounds dramatic. But Joseph did not laugh. Maybe. Or maybe everyone avoids asking difficult questions. She folded her arms and looked at him. Go on. Joseph leaned back and said quietly. Sometimes people keep searching because they think the next person will finally make everything feel complete. The room around them seemed quieter. Bai Lu raised an eyebrow. And you think that is me? Joseph shrugged. I think you are someone people admire because you shine naturally. But I also think when people are constantly moving from connection to connection, they stop asking whether they are choosing people or collecting moments. She stared at him. There was no anger, no offense, only surprise. Because she realized he was not speaking with criticism. He sounded concerned. She smiled slightly. So, what exactly are you trying to say? Joseph looked directly at her and answered. Slow down. Stop moving around different people looking for certainty. Learn the difference between excitement and peace. For several seconds, she said nothing. Not because she agreed. Not because she disagreed. But because nobody had spoken to her that way before. Most people complimented her. Most people admired her. Very few challenged her. She turned and looked across the room. Maybe there was truth in what he said. Maybe not. But the word stayed. Their conversation ended there. At least on the surface. Days later they crossed paths again. This time there were fewer people around. Joseph noticed something immediately. She looked thoughtful. She sat down beside him. You know what annoyed me about what you said? He smiled. Everything. She laughed. No. What annoyed me is that I kept thinking about it. Joseph stayed silent. She continued. People always assume confidence means certainty. But sometimes being surrounded by people makes you more confused. Sometimes attention feels like connection until you realize nobody actually knows you. Joseph nodded. Exactly. People celebrate being wanted. But being understood is different. She looked away. Then asked quietly. So what would you do? Joseph thought for a moment. I would stop asking who likes me. And start asking who brings out the version of me I respect. Her expression shifted. That answer stayed with her. Over the following weeks, she became more intentional. She stopped saying yes to every invitation. Stopped chasing excitement. Stopped treating every new interaction like it had to become something meaningful. Instead, she watched, listened, observed. And something unexpected happened. Life became quieter, but somehow richer. One afternoon, she met Joseph again. This time, she smiled first. You know what? He looked up. What? You were annoying. He laughed. That sounds promising. She nodded. Because for once someone spoke to me like I was a person instead of an image. He looked at her and said something she would remember. People who care about you are not impressed by how many people notice you. They care whether you are becoming someone you actually like. She looked down and smiled. That sentence stayed longer than she expected. Months passed. Their conversation became something they joked about. But underneath the humor was something deeper. Not romance. Not conflict. Respect. The respect that comes when someone says something uncomfortable without trying to embarrass you. And the respect that comes from listening instead of defending yourself. One evening she stood in front of a mirror before another event. Everything looked perfect. The outfit, the lights, the image. Yet she remembered that conversation and asked herself a different question. Am I choosing people because they fit my life, or because I am afraid to be still? That night changed her energy. She entered differently, more present, less rushed, more aware, and people noticed. Not because she became quieter, but because she became clearer. Later she sent Joseph a simple message. You might have been right. His reply came quickly. Not right. Just asking questions. She smiled. Maybe that was the point. Sometimes the people who change your direction are not the loudest. Sometimes they simply ask one question nobody else asked. And suddenly, everything starts looking different. If there is one thing this story leaves behind, it is this. Do not confuse movement with growth. Do not confuse attention with connection. Do not confuse being surrounded with being understood. Slow down. Choose carefully. And never be afraid of the friend who tells you what everyone else avoids saying. Because sometimes one honest conversation can change the way you see everything. The conversation should have ended there. At least that was what both of them expected. But certain words have a strange way of returning when life becomes noisy again. A few weeks later, another event brought them into the same space. Different venue, different crowd, same endless lights and polished conversations. Bai Lu arrived smiling as always. People gathered around her almost instantly. Compliments flowed from every direction. Invitations, introductions, endless moments demanding attention. Yet something had changed. She noticed things she had never paid attention to before. People spoke quickly, but listened very little. Everyone wanted access. Very few wanted understanding. As she stood holding a drink and watching conversations overlap, she unexpectedly spotted Joseph standing near the edge of the room. He noticed her too. This time she walked over first. You started something. He looked confused. Me. She nodded. I have been thinking differently lately. Joseph smiled. That sounds dangerous. She laughed. No. Just uncomfortable. They stepped away from the crowd. She looked around before speaking. Do you know what surprised me? He waited. She continued. When I stopped chasing every connection, I realized I was not losing people. I was discovering who stayed. Joseph looked at her for a second and smiled quietly. That is usually how it works. She let out a long breath. I thought slowing down would make life feel empty. Instead, it feels calmer. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Joseph asked, So, what did you learn? She looked ahead and answered softly. That not every person who enters your life deserves front row seats. That being admired is not the same as being valued. And that sometimes moving constantly is just another way of avoiding difficult questions. Joseph looked amused. That sounds wiser than our first conversation. She smiled. Do not get used to it. They both laughed. Then she added something unexpected. Thank you for saying something uncomfortable instead of something easy. Joseph shrugged. Real friends do not always tell you what sounds good. Sometimes they remind you to stop long enough to hear yourself think. She looked at the crowd one more time. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel the need to chase the room. She simply stood still. And somehow that felt more powerful than being noticed. The night continued, but something felt different. For once, Bai Lu was not thinking about who would speak to her next or which conversation she needed to maintain. She was simply present. That feeling surprised her. Across the room, music played softly, while people moved from group to group, creating the usual atmosphere of excitement. Yet she stayed where she was. Joseph noticed and smiled. Not joining the chaos tonight. She looked at him and laughed. Maybe I retired. He shook his head. No. You just realized you do not have to be everywhere. She thought about that sentence. For so long she believed opportunities only appeared when you stayed visible. That slowing down meant missing out. But standing there now, she wondered whether she had been missing the wrong things all along. After a quiet moment, she turned to Joseph.
Can I ask you something?
He nodded. Who reminds you to slow down? For the first time he paused before answering. Not many people. She looked surprised. You always seem certain. He smiled lightly. That is the illusion. Everyone looks like they know what they're doing until someone asks the right question. She laughed quietly. That sounds familiar. He looked at her. Exactly. For a second neither spoke. Then Bai Lu said something unexpected. Maybe people are not supposed to solve each other. Maybe they are just supposed to remind each other. Joseph nodded slowly. Remind each other of what matters. She looked around one last time. The room had not changed. The lights were still bright. The conversations were still loud. But somehow she felt lighter. Not because she had all the answers, but because she finally stopped searching for them in everyone else.